Can I start this video with a rant real quick? I want to put you guys in the shoes of someone who's been a longtime fan of the Kingdom Hearts series, but also primarily plays games and records them on PC. Being a Kingdom Hearts fan and trying to keep up with all of these games as they were originally coming out was a soul-crushing experience, let me tell you. Kingdom Hearts originally released on the PS2, then the direct sequel, Chain of Memories, was released on the GBA. Then the actual numbered sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2, which was now the third game, came out on the PS2 again. Then Square realized that, hey, not a ton of people actually played Chain of Memories because it was on a completely different console, and they're a little confused. So they remade the game in 3D for the PS2. So, okay, lesson learned, no problem. Well, except not. Over the next 2 years, they would release a prequel, Birth by Sleep, a sidequel, 358 over 2 days, and a direct sequel to 2, Coded, to the PSP, Nintendo DS, and as a Japanese exclusive mobile phone game respectively. These again were all incredibly relevant to the overarching plot of the series, and later games would assume you know what happens in them. Then Square realized their mistake again, remade Coded into a Nintendo DS game, and it was all smooth sailing from there. Sure, like at least half the fan base didn't play all of the games and they had to resort to watching Let's Plays to get their fix, but at least we still kinda knew what was going on. Then the next mainline game was released on the Nintendo 3DS. Well, someone at Square started realizing how much of a pain in the ass it was to keep up with all of these games, and came up with the idea of having 2 collections of the series available on the PS3 that had every title previously released. 1.5 Remix having the original, Chain of Memories, and 358 over 2, and 2.5 Remix having 2, Birth by Sleep, and Coded. So finally, for the first time since 2007, all games were available on one system. Well, except for Dream Drop Distance that was still stuck on the 3DS, because why would anyone want to play the chronologically latest game in this series? Ugh. Actually, it gets worse. I swear someone with some significant control at Square Enix must either hate this franchise, or at least love fucking with its fans, because they release another canon prequel as a Japanese exclusive browser-only game in between these 2 collections. Kingdom Hearts Key. And yes, that is Key spelt with an X. Kingdom Hearts 3, which was technically the 9th game in the series now, was announced for a 2019 release for the PS4 and Xbox One, to which most people asked the valid question, how the hell were we supposed to be prepared for this? So Square ended up bundling 1.5 and 2.5 together, released another collection for Dream Drop Distance, Key, and another sidequel, Birth by Sleep, A Fragmentary Passage, what the fuck? All for the PS4. Xbox One users could go fuck themselves, because they got Kingdom Hearts 3 about a year before any of those collections were even ported over. For those of you that have played Kingdom Hearts 3 and know how wound up that game's story is with the franchise's overall plot, can you imagine that being someone's introduction to the series? Like, you know some poor kid's parents bought them that game because they saw it had Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse on the cover and thought that it was gonna be a cute kid's game, and man, what a fucking mindfuck that must have been to jump into. I mean, at least they got something. PC users were left high and dry during this entire process. Well, until March of 2020, that is, for when Kingdom Hearts made its long-awaited PC debut, with the entire series coming to players. Finally, it seemed like Square was really doing the right thing, and everyone was going to be happy. It's an Epic Games Store exclusive. You really can't make this shit up. Like, I don't have the total hate boner that a lot of people have for the Epic Games Store, but there was just one issue I had that basically made Kingdom Hearts on PC dead on arrival. Lack of controller support. Like, look at this game. Do you honestly think I should be playing this with a keyboard and mouse? I tried, and let me tell you, my hands turned into pretzels, and I didn't even make it out of the tutorial area. So I started to try to find some workarounds. I went and bought an Xbox controller because I heard that some people have had better success when using these on the Epic Games Store rather than PlayStation's offerings. That didn't work. I tried launching the Epic Games Store through Steam since they do actually have controller support, and that didn't work either. I tried using third-party software to trick the game into thinking my controller was acting as a keyboard and mouse setup, and that was at least somewhat functional, but after several attempts to configure the controls to what I really wanted, I couldn't get a feel for replicating the original games. I still thankfully have my copy of 1.5 plus 2.5 collection that I had for the PS4, so I was able to at least play this game, but that required getting a new capture card for this video. I went through a couple of different ones that were either incompatible with my current setup, or were straight up DOA. Side note, don't buy the Elgato 4K 60S Plus, complete and utter garbage. Before I landed on an internal capture card that was honestly served me pretty well. Recording hiccups aside, I'm glad I came across this one because I'll actually be able to record a lot of games on original hardware now. So yeah, this video took a while to put together, a lot of shit really annoyed me, and I had to spend a lot of money. So hey, maybe consider giving your boy a pity, like, and subscribe for his troubles, eh? So with all that out of the way, you guys want to talk about some Kingdom Hearts? I know I sure do. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, 3 things associated with Kingdom Hearts aside from convoluted storytelling and cringy dialogue were action RPG gameplay, Final Fantasy, and Disney. Well, believe it or not, during the actual inception of Kingdom Hearts, none of these things were even on the minds of producers Shinji Hashimoto and Hironobu Sakaguchi. Instead, the big inspiration early on was actually Super Mario 64. See, the two really wanted to make a game that could capture the same 3-dimensional movement of Mario 64, but the only thing they could think of to rival Mario's popularity was a character from Disney. Now, the person that would go on to direct the game, Tetsuya Nomura, overheard their conversation and offered to lead this project. Nomura at the time was known for his monster design in the earlier Final Fantasy games, but got his big break when he became the lead character designer for Final Fantasy VII. So it's actually funny that I mentioned Disney earlier too, because coincidentally enough, Squaresoft and Disney actually shared an office building at the time in Japan, and Sakaguchi had a chance encounter with an executive from Disney during an elevator ride in which he pitched their idea for the game. I'd imagine that must have been one long-ass elevator ride, or Sakaguchi went in there with a plan, but either way, it clearly paid off. There was a lot of pressure on Nomura to make this on par with a mainline Final Fantasy title at the time, which makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of people taking some big risks here. Disney was thankfully pretty lenient with their IPs and gave Square plenty of control with what series they wanted to implement and what they wanted to do with them. That being said, Nomura decided to really keep the Disney characters and worlds as close to the originals as he could. Obviously, liberties needed to be taken to have everything be somewhat cohesive, emphasis on somewhat, but for the most part, not much really needed to be changed. Kingdom Hearts was revealed at 2001's E3, and man, the reception was definitely interesting to think about. People really weren't sure how Square were going to fuse Final Fantasy elements with the Disney backdrop. There was a lot of care shown of these IPs in regards to the art style and voice work, but people were still a little skeptical. Well, that was until they got to play it. Kingdom Hearts was released exclusively to the PS2 in March of 2002 for Japan, with an American release following in September and a European and Australian release in November. And yeah, I guess you could say people liked it. Kingdom Hearts was a massive commercial success, selling over 1 million copies in half a year in the United States by itself, and by 2006, selling over 6 million copies worldwide between the initial version and the Final Mix re-release. The game sits at a generally favorable 85 on Metacritic, with the vast majority of reviews giving the game 8s and 9s. GameSpot gave the game an 82 and was quoted as saying, "Great, largely because it successfully captures the spirit of both Square and Disney in a single game," while GamePro gave a slightly higher score of 90 and said, "Oh, if only those gummy ship segments didn't exist. They're the only blemish on what's otherwise the best action RPG since the 2 and 64 Zeldas." Quite the accolades there, and yeah, I can't wait to talk about those gummy ship sections myself. Just you wait. Kingdom Hearts would go on to win and be nominated for a number of accolades in 2002 for things such as Best Art Style, Graphics, Animation, and Story, and has also been regarded as one of the greatest games released for the PS2, one of the most important JRPGs, and one of the best video games of all time. Quite the high praise, and I have to say, I honestly agree with most of it. This is a game that I don't exactly remember when I first played. At the time, I was very much into my Zelda craze, being obsessed with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Seeing the whole targeting system adapted from those games, but with a much more fluid and flashy combat system, really piqued my interest. It also helped that I adored the PS1 Final Fantasy games and Final Fantasy X on the PS2. Seeing Cloud, Tidus, Aerith, and Squall...
That's Leon.
Okay. It was all just badass. And the Disney stuff, I mean, come on, who didn't grow up watching Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, Hercules, The Nightmare Before Christmas? Hell, Tarzan was a massive movie at the time, and I remember even seeing that one in theaters. The idea of having the charm of Disney and the coolness of Final Fantasy all tied up in a package that was an improved version of Ocarina of Time with RPG mechanics, sign me the fuck up. I took this game like a fish to water, and let me tell you, I played on the easier difficulties and I still got my ass handed to me on a number of occasions. I remember I actually had to get help from a friend because I couldn't beat Giant Ursula in Atlantica, and that fight still gives me PTSD to this very day. I also never got around to making the ultimate weapon. I never beat any of the super bosses. Hell, I never even got the secret ending. That didn't matter to me though, because I still had such a fun time playing and going through this story, and don't get me wrong, those two things have some problems that we'll talk about in a bit, but to me that didn't matter because this game was just hitting all the right spots. As time would go on, I would experience later games in the series like Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2, but I had a tough time keeping up with everything once Coded, 358 Over 2 Days, and Birth by Sleep were released. And I mean, did you watch the beginning of the video? Can you blame me? I did what I could to keep up with the story, but by the time that Dream Drop Distance was released, I sorta checked out. That was until I bought the 1.5 plus 2.5 collection for the PS4 in the lead up to the release for Kingdom Hearts 3. I put that disc into my PS4, booted up Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, and it was like I was 8 years old again. Of course, I was a little bit older, had plenty of other games under my belt, so I didn't think Kingdom Hearts was the best thing I ever played like I did back in 2002. But I still had an awesome time. That was 2018 when I ever played the first Kingdom Hearts, and now it's 2023, and I'm even more seasoned. And dare I say, I have a bit higher standard for my games now. So what do I think after just replaying this game? Oh, come on. I still think this game's fucking rad. Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia talking, and being perfectly honest, I think that is one of this game's biggest strengths. But what I found was still a really fun-ass action RPG with a strong variety in environments and enemies, incredibly flashy boss fights, a ton of secrets and optional stuff to do, an art style that still holds up, voice performances that could easily be slotted into one of the Golden Age Disney films, and of course, one of the best soundtracks in gaming history. Though what I also found wasn't exactly what I remembered from back in 2002 or even 2018. Janky platforming, an unreliable camera, writing that ranges from being overly pretentious while saying nothing to being downright cringe-inducing, some annoying boss or enemy encounters, corners being cut in regards to a number of animations, and a lot of story that acts as pure filler for filler's sake. Your mileage may vary on how much these things annoy you. Some, such as the kind of soulless animations, didn't bother me too much, while other things such as the platforming, writing, and story filler were a bit more intrusive. We have a lot of things to discuss today, so without further ado, this is my review of Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts is a game released in 2002 for the PlayStation 2. This is a fact that I constantly had to remind myself of when re-experiencing this game. The first year of games for the 6th generation of consoles were a graphical step up from the previous, with such titles such as Devil May Cry, Grand Theft Auto 3, and Final Fantasy X being some of the most notable. But the upgrade that we see even just 1 year later with this software really speaks for itself. There are a few small things I'll get out of the way first that really do make the game show some of its age, but they are just minor gripes. Kingdom Hearts, as graphically strong as it is, definitely has its share of corners cut during the cutscenes, primarily in the animation department. Characters will have a few stock animations for things like crossing their arms, going into a battle stance, or looking at other characters, but the really egregious bits come with the characters' facial expressions. Now on the Disney characters, they aren't too bad. I mean, a lot of the princesses hold the same exact expression that you see if you were walking down the toy aisle in a Walmart, but since they're so cartoonish, it's usually fine. The Final Fantasy characters and the Kingdom Hearts original characters are another story. There are times they will look so lifeless or completely disinterested. Sora stares off into nothing, Squall has a permanent scowl on his face, and Sid is trying so hard to keep that thing in his mouth, I don't think I saw his face move a single time in this game. This corner cutting can also be seen in some of the game's worlds, with my personal favorite example being the cheers coming from the Olympus Coliseum from the completely invisible crowd. Some of the characters in specific worlds also don't have a lot of effort being put into them since they aren't voiced, which can make encountering them a little stilted. This is most apparent in Deep Jungle with the gorillas and with half of the princesses in Hollow Bastion. If they do have dialogue, it's told in these text box sections, which while I understand the game's limitation for voice dialogue at the time, every one of these cutscenes just come off as completely inconsequential, and you can mostly skip through them. However, with that being said, that's really my only issue with this game's presentation, because everything else just... man, it's so good. Obviously, I'm playing the collection released on the PS4 on my PlayStation 5, so performance is essentially flawless. I also tested the game on the Epic Games Store, and controller issues aside, the game runs excellent there as well. You can pretty much run this game on whatever frame rate your machine can handle. I don't think I can recall a single instance of drop in performance, and the bugs were pretty much non-existent. Not much else to really say here. And I know I just spent a few minutes complaining about the graphics of this game, but let me stress again, those are incredibly minor gripes. The rest of this game still stands as one of the best looking games of the 6th generation. The art style in this game is incredibly top tier. You take the absolutely iconic features of Disney, plus the anime-influenced art direction of Final Fantasy, and you have Kingdom Hearts. Nowhere is this more prevalent than when looking at the character design. Let's use Sora as an example. You have the big shoes and bright colors that you'd typically associate with someone like Mickey Mouse, but then you add the spiky hair and the necessary amount of belts and zippers that wouldn't look out of place with someone who would be running around with Cloud Strife. It's really hard to strike a balance between having someone like Sephiroth in the same game as Donald fucking Duck, but I think Square did a good job on creating something that works. And that's just with the main characters. Don't even get me started with the enemy design. The Heartless are one of my personal favorite groups of enemies in all of gaming. They're all grouped together by having this dark motif and typically have a symbol identified somewhere on their bodies, but they go absolutely insane with the enemy variety in this game. Each world has at least one exclusive Heartless enemy type, but oftentimes more than that, and they continually get introduced over the course of the game. These can range from your standard shadows, wyverns, giant floating raisins, jellyfish, mummies, a giant hemorrhoid, suits of armors, pirate ships, to even just big motherfuckers. He's fat! The final mix version of this game gave all the Heartless a new coat of paint, which kinda reminds me of a shiny version of Pokemon. And like shiny versions of Pokemon, I honestly think their original color scheme is better for the most part, and I wish there was at least an option to switch them back to that original look. And when you're fighting these guys during gameplay, man, what a spectacle it is. Particle effects are flying everywhere, the animations on Sora, his party members, and the Heartless are all incredibly fluid, and all this is going on with a rock-solid frame rate. There's also a number of worlds that are featured within Kingdom Hearts, most of them being Disney related, but a number of original ones too. These, aesthetically speaking, are all phenomenally designed and each stand out from one another. Exploring the desert streets of Agrabah, the pirate ship of Neverland, and of course the absolute mindfuckery of Wonderland are all awesome experiences. Honestly, the standouts for me are some of the original worlds though. Dive to the Heart, Traverse Town, and Hollow Bastion are all awesome for being visually distinctive, having interesting points of interest, and the music. Oh, the fucking music. Good God, one of the best soundtracks in gaming, hands down. From taking the tracks from the original Disney movies and adapting them to this game, to the original pieces that range from blood pumping to melancholic, to the world-specific battle themes that loop into and out of combat, to when you walk away, you don't hear me say, oh, it's all just so fucking good, man. Audio design in general is absolutely stellar, with spells and effects all having incredibly distinctive noises, especially when it comes to combat, even if hearing Sora, Donald, and Goofy shout the same three things can get a bit tiresome. That being said, the voice acting is the last thing I'll touch on in this game's presentation, and man, what an excellent job it does. Haley Joel Osment, only a few years removed from his role in The Sixth Sense, voices Sora, and he does a great job for showing off Sora as someone who has both youthful ignorance, but also innocence. Riku and Kairi's voice actors also do an excellent job of playing the roles, and Billy Zane as Ansem is just so fucking badass. But I think the highlight of this game has to be the work with the Disney cast. They got damn near everyone to return for the roles. Scott Weiner as Aladdin, Brian Bless as Clayton, Pat Carroll as Ursula, James Wood as Hades, fucking Gilbert Gottfried as Iago, everyone's here. Obviously, there are a couple exceptions to this, such as Robin Williams not returning as Genie, but instead using Dan Castellaneta, who voiced Genie in the sequels and Aladdin TV show, so even when they couldn't get the original actors, you better believe they got the next best person available. All of this goes a really long way into shaping the next big point of interest in Kingdom Hearts, the story. The story of Kingdom Hearts follows a boy named Sora. He's your standard teenager who beats up his friends with a stick, hangs out with some of your favorite Final Fantasy characters and also Selphie, and has strange dreams with people giving him vague symbolic explanations that may or may not be followed up on. He lives on the conveniently named Destiny Islands with Kairi, a longtime friend of Sora who I think might be his love interest, and Riku, essentially the Sasuke of this game, who I definitely know is Sora's love interest. They dream of building a raft and exploring outside of the island that they grew up on. The night before they set out, these strange black creatures attack the island, with Riku being swallowed into a dark void. Sora almost follows suit, but is saved thanks to being bestowed the ability to wield the Keyblade, a sword that chooses Sora to be its wielder that, while looking pretty silly, manages to help Sora fend off these creatures, who he later finds out are called the Heartless. Only for a little while though, because Destiny Islands is eventually swallowed into the void. Sora awakens in a new location called Traverse Town, but Riku and Kairi are nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, in the Disney castle, Donald finds a note from King Mickey who tells him that he has gone to find out why there's been such an increase in the Heartless population of the worlds, and instructs Donald and Goofy to find something called the Key that can help aid in this issue. The two use their gummy ship to travel to Traverse Town to begin their search. After a lot of running around and meeting some of your favorite Final Fantasy characters and also Yuffie, Sora, Donald, and Goofy meet up and decide to work together after probably one of the most cringe-inducing scenes in all of gaming.
That's one funny face.
I kid you not, my wife was watching me play through this game, and after we finished this cutscene, she got up, left the room, and didn't say a word to me. She hasn't looked me in the eye since. That was 3 weeks ago. The group sets out to look for Riku, Kairi, and King Mickey by traveling to a number of worlds and also sealing their keyholes to lock them off from further Heartless influence. Meanwhile, we also see that a group of Disney villains led by Maleficent are working together and are using the Heartless to track down the 7 Princesses of Heart in order to access something called Kingdom Hearts. No, not the money-printing multimedia franchise, but a wealth of power for all hearts. Whatever that means. Even worse, it looks like Maleficent has found Riku and is slowly starting to work her influence on him. Alright, so we got our setup. We know why our heroes are traveling together, what our villains' goals are, and what the personal stakes are that connect the two things together. So where does Kingdom Hearts' story really go from here? This is actually probably my biggest issue with Kingdom Hearts. Sora, Donald, and Goofy will travel across multiple Disney worlds and essentially act as extra characters to the movie plots for those respective worlds. Except for Olympus Coliseum and Halloween Town that kind of have their own thing going on. This is the majority of Kingdom Hearts' story, and sad to say, it's very loosely tied to the greater overall plot, and oftentimes comes off as a lesser version of these movies' stories. Let's talk about that first. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that everyone watching this video has at least seen one of these Disney movies. Well, when talking about the cutscenes that progress the story in each of these worlds, imagine that you were essentially reading the Cliff Notes version of each of those films with a few winks and nods to notable scenes, lines of dialogues, or visuals. Now this sort of works fine for Kingdom Hearts because, hey, it's Disney, this is meant to play off your nostalgia for those films and be an experience with those characters you're already familiar with. If this wasn't Disney, or hell, if you're one of the 0.01% of people that have never watched any of these movies, I really don't know what's here for you. You spend about an hour tops with each of these worlds before moving on to the next one to never see most of these characters again. It's fine for me because it's just cool to fight Jafar, see King Triton, or also look at how big they made Clayton's mouth, Jesus Christ. But for those that have never watched these movies, what's the appeal? The other thing that really bothers me about this is how essentially the plot gets put on hold until we first get to Hollow Bastion. See, things happen in the Disney worlds that loosely tie some themes together in what's actually going on, or maybe one of the Disney villains is who you're fighting there, or maybe one of the Princesses of Heart is in these worlds that you're in, but it really doesn't amount to that much. There's character development throughout the worlds too, like Sora, Donald, and Goofy progressively becoming a better team, or Riku slowly drifting towards the darkness, but most of that comes through events that happen in between the completion of worlds. The Disney stuff, for lack of a better word, is essentially filler. Not bad filler necessarily, but story-wise, everything could be removed from these Disney worlds and nothing in the overall plot would really change. Well, back to the main story. Sora and his friends eventually make it to Hollow Bastion, which Maleficent has been using as her headquarters. They confront Riku on the way up to the castle, who actually manages to take the Keyblade away from Sora, revealing that he is the actual intended wielder, but the blade went to Sora after Riku was swallowed by the darkness. This causes Donald and Goofy to leave Sora. Momentarily before Riku tries to attack Sora, Donald and Goofy come to his rescue. With the power of anime and friendship, Sora is able to regain the Keyblade and the three defeat Riku. Riku, not content with his perceived lack of strength, plunges further into the darkness thanks to a mysterious robed figure. Sora and friends make their way through Hollow Bastion, defeat Maleficent, before finding a comatose Kairi at the base of the keyhole. They run into Riku again, who reveals that Kairi is the final Princess of Heart. She isn't conscious because her heart resides inside of Sora, and he has been using Maleficent as a pawn in order to see his plan through. This is where Ansem officially takes over as the main antagonist. This tall, tan, silver-haired, sexy voice motherfucker was referenced a few times throughout the game, like visiting Sora on Destiny Islands. The Final Fantasy characters in Traverse Town talk about him, and you get Ansem reports that essentially chronologue his studies on all of the Kingdom Hearts vocabulary terms that you've probably grown numb to by now. Sora defeats Riku again before using Riku's Dark Keyblade to unlock Kairi's heart from his body. This unfortunately means Sora falls to darkness and becomes a Heartless himself, for about 2 minutes before Kairi gives him a hug and uses her light to bring him back to normal. Sure. The gang travels to the remnants of the worlds destroyed by the Heartless, the aptly named End of the World, to confront Ansem before he reaches the door to darkness. After your standard JRPG final dungeon and 9-phase final boss, we defeat Ansem through the power of plot convenience when we reveal that Kingdom Hearts wasn't darkness, but the friends we made along the way. Ansem sucks as a researcher. We end the game with Riku and King Mickey on the opposite side of the door, who seal the other side and vow to meet us again. Sora has another brief reunion with Kairi before she's sent back to Destiny Islands, as all of the other worlds reconstruct themselves. Why Sora doesn't get sent back with her? Your guess is as good as mine. Finally, we see Sora, Donald, and Goofy walking down a long road somewhere, talking about how they still need to find Riku and King Mickey before Pluto delivers them a letter letting them know that they've been greenlit for another sequel. So yeah, that's the story for Kingdom Hearts. An honestly pretty simple tale about a kid who just wants to have his friends back that gets wound up in an adventure that causes him to save the universe. It was honestly really refreshing to come back to this one after how all over the place the plot gets with later games in this series. This one was very straightforward and much more easy to understand. I like all the characters, even if some of them like Kairi are pretty one-note and useless. I think the globetrotting adventure across multiple worlds is fun, even if not everything matters too much. And I like the melancholic and childlike wonder vibe that this game gives off from time to time. What I don't like, and this is a heavy one for me, is the writing. This game has like 4 or 5 vocabulary terms that it wants to beat you over the head with again and again to get its themes across that to me sound like the game is trying to say something more profound than it actually is. Seriously, take a shot every single time you hear the word light, darkness, key, heart, or friends, and see how long you last. If you make it past Traverse Town, seek help. Like, I get it. Light good, darkness bad. Friends good, heart usually good, but sometimes bad. It gets a lot worse, and I mean a lot worse in later entries, but here, it is still something that gets my eyes rolling more often than not. With that being said, for how cheesy and dumb the writing can be, I still can't bring myself to hate this story. Yeah, there's a lot of filler. Yeah, most of it's just dumb buzzwords tied together to bring some semblance of cohesion. And yeah, you have fucking Goofy talking about what will happen if we implode an entire world.
Yeah, Goofy. Murder! Goofy, shut the fuck up. I love murder.
I still love playing through this story though. It's something that's very simple, something that has some mystery to it, a ton of memorable characters, plenty of fan service.
Kairi's inside me?
Not that type of fan service. This story is just a good time. However, the real reason I always come back to this game, the real reason I don't mind playing through all the Disney worlds, and the real reason I recommend this game to others has to be the gameplay. Kingdom Hearts is an action RPG that takes a number of motifs from the Final Fantasy series while putting it into the framework that almost fits more in line with Devil May Cry or the N64 Legend of Zelda games. Sora is able to lock on enemies, execute combos, and has a number of additional options in regards to the battle system. A big thing to take note of is Sora's MP meter, which is used for casting magic or using some abilities like Strike Raid, Sonic Blade, or Ragnarok. The MP meter is constantly refilling as Sora attacks, takes damage, picks up MP orbs, or uses items to replenish that meter. This incentivizes Sora to use magic or these special abilities in order to make the most out of that resource and keep combat fresh. One of the most defining features of Kingdom Hearts gameplay is the menu-based style of combat. See, Sora is able to move around just fine, but if he wants to attack, cast magic, or use an item or summon, he has to navigate through this menu. Now attacking is just fine. When you press the X button on the attack option, Sora will begin his combo and continue attacking for every button press. When it comes to the other 3 options, the game does ask a little bit more from the player than just that. If Sora wants to do any of these other options, you have to use the D-pad to navigate through this menu on the bottom left-hand part of the screen, which will open up a sub-menu in order to select your option. This can be a little cumbersome sometimes. Thankfully, most encounters aren't super fast-paced, giving the player enough time to go through these menus. Even better, there's an option to allocate 3 of these actions to some quick commands, which will probably go to healing and defensive options, but it's nice to have the choice. Breaking down these options, the magic system is probably the most expansive out of the 3. As Sora progresses through the story and completes certain side objectives, he will learn new magic. They're your standard fire, blizzard, and thunder spells that you're probably familiar with if you played any Final Fantasy game before, and they can even be upgraded to Tier 2 and Tier 3 magic versions of each. Same goes for the other spells in Sora's arsenal. The Cure spell provides some quick healing, Arrow boosts defenses, Gravity takes out a percentage of health based off the user's magic stat, and Stop prevents the target from moving for a period of time. There's a healthy amount of spells here, but if I'm being honest, I didn't find that much of a use for most of them. Like, the Fire spell is okay for taking out threats at long range, but doesn't really do that much damage. Blizzard is a little stronger, but fires like a shotgun that has pitiful range. Thunder does a decent AoE, but isn't particularly strong either. I think the elemental spells are only really worth using if an enemy has a particular weakness to it. Otherwise, you are almost always better off using one of Sora's damaging special abilities for your MP usage. Stop is okay, but I would rather just kill my enemy faster by not using it. And this spell is honestly really only needed for the Phantom boss fight. Gravity is solid, but relies a little bit too much on speccing into the magic stat to make it useful. I do like it for taking out Heartless to have areas that you can't hit them straight on, like the large bodies, but it's pretty situational otherwise. That leaves Cure and Arrow, which are universally useful and always worth casting when needed, but really don't do much outside of their standard effects. The magic is nice because it's always an option, but it's not something that I would say should be your primary form of offense. But hey, maybe there's a combination out there of items and gear that can really make an all magic build super viable. I don't know. Sora can also use a number of items such as potions, ethers, and elixirs in battle that can essentially be used to supply extra healing or MP in a pinch. The last main menu option to cover is summons, which I didn't utilize too much, but they can be pretty strong. These cause your party members to temporarily disappear, and you can summon another Disney character to provide assistance. Genie to cast some spells, Dumbo to shoot some water, Mushu to attack with fire, or Tinkerbell to keep your party members around while also giving you auto life. This is my personal favorite. Outside of combat, you can also equip Sora with a number of things to give him an edge the next time he is in combat. Most prominently is the different types of Keyblades that Sora can acquire. There are quite a lot of them in this game, but most of them are actually really not that useful even by the time that you're able to first acquire them. Two of the biggest examples of that being Metal Chocobo and Oblivion, two of my favorite Keyblades aesthetically, but they're immediately outclassed when you get them because Olympia and Divine Rose are just better options. Sora is also able to equip different pieces of, well, equipment in order to bolster his stats. He starts only with a couple slots at first, but gets more as he levels up. Oh yeah, I should talk about that. So the RPG mechanics themselves are actually pretty light, as your stat progression and XP gain are mainly determined by some choices that you make at the beginning of the game. These determine how fast you level up in the early and late game, what stats upgrade first, and most importantly, when you get certain abilities. Choosing the sword, wand, or shield up front will give Sora more offensive, magic, or defensive capabilities, while sacrificing one will put off those abilities for later. Personally, I recommend taking the shield first, as it gives you access to some really powerful abilities such as Leaf Bracer and Second Chance, which in some fights will mean the difference between living or dying. The abilities actually give you the most choice for your build in the entire game. There's a number of abilities such as your standard dodge roll, counters, and combo extensions, to giving things to Sora such as new finishing moves, boosting his MP regeneration, or allowing him to spend that MP to release devastating attacks. Though let's be honest, by the end of the game, you will probably have most of these abilities active with the number of AP boosts that you'll eventually be able to find or create. Sora isn't alone in being able to utilize all of these things too, as your party members can do everything that I just listed, minus the summons of course. You have Donald and Goofy following you through the majority of the game, focusing on magic and physical attacks respectively. They are computer controlled, as you will soon find out by the amount of times they jump into danger, waste items on completely avoidable things, or cast spells on you that you were in the middle of casting. Jesus Christ, come the fuck on, Donald. You can thankfully change the AI to cater a little bit more to what playstyle you want them to have. I ended up mainly having Donald focus on defensive magic such as Cure, Arrow, Stop, and Gravity, which was a big help. Goofy, I basically took all of his MP usage abilities away, except for the ones that gave his MP to others. Sorry Goofy, but I just think I can make better use out of it than you can.
Oh, fucking do it again.
Okay. There are other party members too, with most Disney Worlds giving you access to characters such as Tarzan, Aladdin, Ariel, Jack Skellington, Peter Pan, or Beast, and they're all pretty decent. Unless it was required, I didn't really use any of them though, since they take Donald or Goofy out of the party. It's not like Donald or Goofy miss out on XP thankfully, just that when exploring the world, you'll occasionally come across these Trinity marks that require Donald and Goofy to be in the party for, and if you don't have them, you have to backtrack. Actually, speaking of backtracking, let's talk about the world design real quick. And you know, there was a point in time that I would sit here and tell you how much better the elaborate and gimmicky design of Kingdom Hearts was compared to the hallway structure of Kingdom Hearts 2. Like in Kingdom Hearts 1, each world felt more distinct, had tons of secrets to find. But nope, I was wrong. I'm glad they moved away from these level ideas. It's not every world that's a pain, but some levels just have ideas or sections that really don't work, or it's just a complete chore to get through. Traverse Town is actually one of the better examples of level design in this game, which makes sense since it essentially acts as the player's hub. There's a lot of variety in this level, probably the most amount of secrets in any world, and a good sense of progression over the course of the game. I kinda like Wonderland for the whole scavenger hunt thing, and each room has its own sort of gimmick, which is kinda fun. Olympus Coliseum is just your standard tournament battle, which, hey, I'm a sucker for that in literally any RPG, so it gets a pass from me. Then we have Deep Jungle. Man Deep Jungle. This world is just you going back and forth between the camp and the treehouse like 4 times, I think. And you can really only slide down vines, swing across trees, and fight Sabor so many times before it really starts to wear thin. Plus, no Phil Collins in this world? Yeah, this one sucks. Agrabah is pretty good. I love how the city has a lot of verticality to it, and the Cave of Wonders has tons of traps to give players more of a challenge, but the underwater sections in the cave really aren't that great to navigate. Oh man, speaking of bad underwater sections, Atlantica. Fucking Atlantica. So the entire world is an ocean. That means Sora needs to turn into a mermaid, which unfortunately really changes how he controls. Now the swimming isn't that bad. I mean, combat can be a little awkward, but you can get used to it pretty quick. What I don't like is how this effectively makes half of Sora's abilities that you were using over the course of the game useless since they don't translate to Atlantica Sora. And it's really easy to get lost in this world because everything really just looks the same. Oh, speaking of worlds that look the same, let's talk about fucking Monstro. This is where some of the holes in Kingdom Hearts gameplay really starts to show. First, like I said, everything in Monstro looks the same, and it's very easy to get lost. Second, the platforming really starts to show how janky it can be here. You got a bit of a taste in this with the race and Destiny Islands, or even Deep Jungle, but here it's even more obvious. Thankfully, Halloween Town has a pretty normal experience, so there's not much to say there, and Neverland gives Sora the ability to fly, which is a better version of Atlantica. Hollow Bastion has 5 or 6 gimmicks. You have the first section without a usable weapon, you have the switches you have to flip in order to navigate through the waterway, you have the book matching puzzle, the Resident Evil style door keys, the lifts that take you from points of interest, the moving blocks near the top. Yeah, there's a ton of depth to this world, which is probably why it's one of my favorites. And to cap it all off, the end of the world is a glorified enemy gauntlet and boss rush. Standard JRPG stuff, it seems. Oh, actually, one more thing I forgot. The 100 Acre Wood is in this game, and it offers a host of minigames to complete. I mean, they're pretty janky and mostly terrible, but it's kind of fun to get the scatter pages and come do more and more of this world from time to time. What's also kind of nice is Sora will occasionally have the option to choose between 2 worlds to visit, which can kind of change up your playthrough a little bit. So how does Sora get to these worlds exactly? Well, oh boy, do I have a distraction for you. Let me introduce you to the Gummy Ship. When traveling to a new world, Sora has to fly there manually by using the Gummy Ship, and even though these sections only last for about 2 to 3 minutes, let me tell you, they are the biggest wastes of time. Look, this is not Star Fox 64. Hell, this isn't even Star Fox for the SNES. This is one of the most bland rail shooters you will ever play. It was so boring, I honestly tried to just hold down the fire button and not move or pay any attention, but you actively do need to dodge things or else you will die and have to do the level over again. It's not like it's challenging at all though, but you need to devote just enough effort to pay attention to be able to pass the stage. What's crazy too is that there's a ton of optional missions and even a whole dedicated shipbuilding system to this. Yeah, Starfield, eat your fucking heart out. Kingdom Hearts beat you by over 20 years. But seriously, these might be the absolute worst sections of the game, and I don't even think you spend an hour of your total playtime doing them, but they're just so boring. Getting back to some of the highlights, let's talk enemy design. Now, I gushed earlier about how visually distinct every enemy was, and thankfully, this also translates to the gameplay. Enemies often have a number of easily telegraphed attacks that allow Sora to properly counter them. Some enemies have weaknesses to certain types of magic. Some enemies can have their attacks countered or sent right back to them. And some enemies are just a pain in the ass. Yeah, not every enemy is great to deal with, and some are just there to waste your time. Like the Wizard Heartless who constantly teleport away, or the Angel Jar Things who constantly put their wings up as shields, or the Invisibles that turn, well, invisible. Some of these annoyances can also translate into boss fights too, like getting Cerberus to put his heads down, having the Cave of Wonders not knock you off, or trying to out DPS Ursula in a complete slugfest. Seriously, fuck this fight. Those are just some of the bad examples though. Most of the bosses are honestly fucking sweet. Fighting Dragon Maleficent, Ansem, Cloud and Squall at the same time, fighting fucking Sephiroth in an absolute spectacle of a match. Kingdom Hearts really knows how to make some flashy ass boss fights, even if some of them are a bit annoying. Though a lot of this can be adjusted based on the difficulty, but if I'm being honest, I'd really only recommend playing this game on Proud. The easier difficulties might be fine if you're looking for something a little bit more relaxed or are just trying to enjoy the story, but the combat becomes pretty mindless. You also have the option of enabling an ability to prevent XP gain if that's your thing and you really want to challenge yourself. I don't really get enjoyment out of doing that personally, but I am glad that that option is available. Speaking of optional shit available, boy, let me give you the rundown. You got the Olympus Coliseum fights, the minigames in the 100 Acre Woods, collecting the 101 Dalmatians, optional gummy ship missions if you really have nothing else to do, getting all the optional items, completing the synthesis shop if you don't have a full-time job, and the numerous super bosses in the endgame. This stuff can easily tack on an extra 10 to 20 hours to your total playtime. That's pretty much Kingdom Hearts gameplay in a nutshell. Definitely one of the highlights of the game, but I won't lie, with the power of hindsight, there are better games in the series when it comes to combat and exploration. There are, however, worse examples in this same franchise, so overall, the original Kingdom Hearts gameplay sits pretty squarely in the middle of the series for me. Kingdom Hearts is a game that has left a massive impression on me. It's a game that got me to follow this franchise's convoluted story no matter how many platforms it was released on. It got me to be open to experiencing more Japanese forms of media, and it made me realize how much I love the action RPG genre. However, this game also shows its age in a number of areas. It cuts some corners in its animation, the story can't help but spew some of the same buzzwords over and over, and the platforming is rough. But with all that being said, I still think this game is fucking great. The combat still has plenty of depth on the harder difficulties, there's tons of optional shit to do, you have some of the best looking graphics from the PS2 era, you have a ton of memorable characters, and you have that fucking music. No matter how annoying some of the enemies can be, no matter how cheesy the story is, no matter how bullshit the fucking minigames are in the 100 Acre Wood, I always have a great time playing this game. Kingdom Hearts gets a high recommendation from me to anyone who loves playing action RPGs, is a Disney fan, or really wants to experience what the PS2's library has to offer. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for watching. What was your favorite memory of Kingdom Hearts? Please be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And hey, if you enjoyed today's video, maybe consider giving a like and subscribing. Thank you guys again. I'll catch you in the next video.